Hello, welcome to Off the Shelf Reviews. It's Gaming Friday. I'm Gary.
And I'm Geoff.
And Geoff, I cannot wait to talk about Dungeon Keeper. Dungeon Keeper from 1997, developed by Bullfrog Productions under the director of Peter Molyneux. There's that name.
Not to be confused with Stefan Molyneux.
No.
Still both bell ends,
Man, you know what? It's taken me a long time to go, okay, yeah, Peter Molyneux, bit of a bell end. But it's because after this game, he reached a godlike status as a games developer. He was the one games developer whose name and identity I knew.
Yeah.
And so when he went off to do Fable, I was just like, I can't wait to go play Fable. When he made Black and White, it's like, this guy makes amazing games, full of replayability. And just this opening cut sequence, you know? It just reminds you of Dungeons and Dragons, kind of spins it around a little bit. Plays with the humour of the setting as well.
Yeah.
This is one of the best opening cut sequences to a game ever.
Well, Bullfrog was the god of the god games, weren't they?
They really were.
They were innovators in that area. And Dungeon Keeper flipped it on its head and you got to be the baddie instead, which is arguably probably more fun.
Exactly. Yes, it is. I mean, there's very few games even today that let you be the bad guy.
Yeah.
You know, after having a long drought after Dungeon Keeper 2, which came out 1999.
Yeah.
There was, I think it was as Overlord, where you get to play as a dark minion and you have hundreds of minions running around of different nature to do the different skills and things. But it wasn't Dungeon Keeper, but it let you be the bad guy.
Yeah, it was inspired by Dungeon Keeper, very that sort of esque, but it was much more like micromanagement rather than a whole dungeon management.
Yes,
wasn't it?
yeah. So this here is actually recorded footage of what I played last year in 2018. Obviously, there was a bit of a drought in gaming, and I felt the call. I felt the call to go back to Dungeon Keeper, and I knew I was going to have a hard time getting this game to run. And right now, you're seeing here in this footage, I had a hard time trying to control just this smooth navigation of the world map to choose the level. Obviously, that's the first level there. Right now, the map is all looking very sunny and glossy, and everyone's happy. And of course, the more levels you progress through, that map starts to fill with lava. The sky goes red. You hear wolves howling.
Much more like home.
Yes, much more comfortable.
Yeah, I love this game. I didn't get to... Personally, I never got to complete this when it was first out. It was an old DOS game.
Yes.
But
and Windows 95. And Mac.
That takes you back, doesn't it? But it was a game that I very much enjoyed, what I did play of it. And I do own its spiritual successors, which are in my list of games to really give some love.
Well, I'll say now that this game is available on GOG, on Good Old Games. Mm-hmm. It's under £5. I believe it's also on Origin, which is EA's store. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I think it's free if you're a member of their monthly subscription. If not, again, I think it's probably under £5.
It's been there as one of their free giveaways because
many
Origin
times
was doing,
because they were probably trying to promote the Dungeon Keeper game, which I refuse to acknowledge exists.
EA'd absolutely ruined this, didn't they?
They turned it into a mobile game with microtransactions or paywalls which stopped you progressing or building. You know how I'm happily, freely just building and landscaping my dungeon right now?
Yeah.
You'd have to pay for imps to break down every single one of these blocks, or you'd have to wait a week for each block to be removed. Disgusting practice.
God damn.
And that's the thing with EA as well, is that Bullfrog, Peter Molyneux sold Bullfrog to EA. Peter Molyneux took a comfortable position in EA, but before Dungeon Keeper was ever released, Peter Molyneux was already wanting to leave the corporate nature that was EA, and he pretty much resigned, and EA wanted them. EA also rushed Bullfrog into making other games in short time windows. I wrote a quote down. One of the developers of Bullfrog said that working for EA was like Bullfrog being assimilated by the Borg from Star Trek into the hive mind, where they were then forced to make derivative content, which they weren't really happy doing. And then the guy that took them there, Peter Molyneux, went, "Yeah, I'm out." And went and formed Lionhead Studios. Bullfrog were then forced to make games that EA wanted them to, until they eventually went under in 2001.
Yeah, it's a scenario we've seen play out again and again. Blizzard's
Yes.
currently going through it with Activision, just completely being eviscerated. Everybody that's worth anything is leaving. The Blizzard's losing all their fan base, and we've seen this. You know, like, for those of us who are OG gamers, we've seen this play out time and time again, where innovative minds just sell out to big publishers, and all those publishers care about is their bottom line. So much so that they don't care about the games at all. And in the end, I mean, it'll backfire on them. Do you know what I mean? Like, how well did Dungeon Keeper ever do? Like the most recent one. You know, nobody would go to play the new Dungeon Keeper. They'd either go back and play this old one, or they'd get one of the spiritual successors.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Exactly, the spiritual successors, which we will get into in a bit. Now, I said I had troubles running this game from GOG, and but there is a fan-made mod called KeeperFX, which helps you change the resolution, fix some of the bugs and crashes that the game can have. Mm-hmm. So I know this game at the moment doesn't look like it's in its best resolution.
Well, yeah. But that it is, you know...
it's over a 20-year-old game.
It's the sort of game you would have played at 640 by 480 on
exactly,
DOS.
on a giant chunky monitor.
Yeah, on a CRT.
So I was just flabbergasted that the game was running and it didn't look bud ugly.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, so what do you think of the graphics from release and today?
Well, I mean, they're of their time, aren't they?
They're of their time, but would you say it's still not comparable with some indie titles of the last couple of years?
I mean, retro styling indie titles are going for this sort of pixel arty look and feel when they're trying to copy it, but this is the original, you know? Like,
yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's sometimes a bit hard to see what you're actually dealing with when you're used to new graphics.
True.
For me, you know, I'm used to 4K now and big shiny things, so I would be looking to play a spiritual successor me, just so I've got a bit more of a crispness to what I can see, and I can actually, you know, it's not quite so muddy and blurry.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's not like I hate this. If you can tolerate this kind of old school pixel art, the gameplay is where this is at, you know, like they didn't have the graphics. And Bullfrog was an innovator in terms of game mechanics, specifically for strategy games.
That's exactly what this is, a strategy management dungeon builder.
Yeah.
You build your dungeon, you protect your dungeon.
Yeah.
It has a single player campaign. It also has a multiplayer online or over a network.
It's got a sense of humour as well.
Absolutely. And that comes with the humorous, sadistic nature of the voiceover as he describes how happy the people of the townspeople are, you know, and how they've never felt true fear, true suffering until you come along and teach them. And so, you know, and you also have the characters like the Mistress on screen at the moment, the Dark Mistress, who loves a bit of torture, loves a bit of self-torture.
Kinky.
She will torture your victims that you can put into the torture chamber from the prison right here.
Yeah.
There is an option when you're playing the game to toggle whether you defeat enemies or whether you knock them out and take them to your prison. You can leave them in the prison to die and put them in the graveyard to return them as vampires or as skeletons, or you can torture them in the torture chamber to reveal the map, or you can actually, if you feed them chickens whilst they're in prison to restore their health, you can torture them enough so that they join your side and will fight against the other heroes. As you can see here, this is a training pit to train all of your minions, all of your creatures. Right now, my workshop's just built me another pointless alarm trap, so I'm just going to build it and sell it. There are 20 single-player levels in this game.
Yeah.
There are 6 secret levels that you can find. With the secret levels, they'll enable you to find unique creatures or bonuses to take then back into the 20 main levels. Mm-hmm. There are also 15 deeper dungeon levels, which came in an expansion when the game also released a gold edition of itself, which is where I first found the game. There are 15 different types of room to build.
Yeah.
There are a ton of spells to research and traps and different types of doors to build and protect your dungeon. There are 17 different types of creatures that you can have habit inhabit your dungeon, including flies, spiders, warlocks, skeletons, the Dark Mistress, and of course the game's mascot, the Horned Reaper.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because each one of these animals has certain requirements before they will wander into your dungeon through the nearest portal. And certain monsters will also take offense if their lair is right next to another. So flies and spiders don't get along, and if their lairs are close to each other, they're going to fight each other. Well, they might just fight each other out of principle. Luckily, the flies, if the dungeon has cracks in it, will fly off and navigate and explore the terrain for you. But then you also get like the Horned Reaper, who gets genuinely unhappy all the time anyway. He's the one character that you occasionally need to go and drop gold on in order to make him happy again. Otherwise, he'll go and murder everyone in your dungeon.
Oh, fair play. But you want him on your side?
You always want him on your side, and so with certain dungeons, if I end up with more than one Horned Reaper, or even with one, I would build a subsection of the dungeon with a locked door that has a lair, a chicken pen, and a training ground just for the Horned Reaper, just for him. And then when the battle time comes, I just take him out of his own private area, drop him into the battlefront, and then when the battle's done, I take him back and put him back in his own private locked doorway, his own dungeon.
Good thinking.
It's also fine then if the heroes break through and they break into the Horned Reaper's lair. Well, bigger fool them.
Yeah, see. It's like a little trap of its own.
Of its own, of course, of course. There are 12 different hero types that can come and assault your dungeon, from monks, fairies, giants, archers, warriors, and of course the most feared samurai warriors. Of course you also get the one Lord of the Land on every mission, and then of course the final boss is the Avatar, who comes to defeat you. There are also hidden secret powers hidden on every level, which makes you want to use your imps and go exploring everywhere to find power-ups, which lets you level up every active minion in your dungeon. And there is, of course, the most unique item, which the game doesn't even tell you exists, which is to transfer a creature. And you definitely want to be doing that, so that once you build up a character up to level 9, level 10, once the fight's over and before you click off to go into the next dungeon, you cast the spell and go, this one creature, you're coming with me into the next mission. Okay. So you start the next mission with a level 10 creature who can just go and help you set up and advance.
So is that the only thing you can carry over?
Yes, yes. Some of the missions in the campaign specifically restrict you from building certain traps, researching certain spells, stop certain enemy creatures inhabiting the dungeon. So you have to be creative in the ways that you build your dungeon, utilize the money that you've got, because for the most part the money will run out. There are a few gem spots which are infinite, but they require more mining from the imps, and they're usually quite far away from where you're going to be able to build gold rooms to store it in.
Because most of your gold is from little pockets of gold in the areas of the dungeon where you can mine.
That's right,
clean
yes.
out.
And clean them out.
Once you've cleaned out that dirt, that's a big open space which you've either got to fill or block off, because that's, I suppose, heroes can come in. Do they all come in at one particular point, or can they come in at various different
heroes
places?
A bunch of the heroes will already be on the map, and some of them will have dwarf tunnelers, which act just like the game's imps, which you use as the main source to break walls down, fortify your walls, carry dead bodies around, plant the traps, etc. And you can fortify the walls. So if you look in the top left of the map, you can see the dungeon, you can see the rooms, you can see sort of the grey outlines around. That means the walls have been fortified, or it is terrain which can never be broken down anyway. But imps, it does take time. They have to fortify each wall section one at a time. But you can see all of this here is fortified, which means you can't break it down. There is a very late game spell which lets you unfortify enemy walls, which then, of course, is a way to breach the Lord of the Land's areas from your own different creative ways, if you want to avoid a bunch of traps, or if you want to launch a sneak attack, or if you want to make a diversion, or if you want to make a corridor which funnels the enemies through because you've got a bunch of boulder traps on the other side, which will just do havoc to his forces.
Is that a mage hero coming in there.
There's a mage hero and another hero, and you can see I've got a lot of forces right now. I also say, as a word of advice for people, is I never used to do this, but you should train your imps, because when you train your imps, they move and mine a hell of a lot faster.
Right.
You also need to learn what your minions are best at. So obviously you want your warlocks, you want to put them into the library along with dragons because they're good for research, but you also don't want to neglect training them in the training room, which also costs gold constantly whilst they're training.
Right.
Once it's a fine balance between getting all of the rooms to build, the spells to cast, and building the traps, between creating the dungeon with the right room spaces, the right tile size. I usually started off by 3x3 rooms and then soon expanded it to 5x5 rooms. Mm-hmm. But you just get creative with how you want to build the corridors, and that's one of the unique things about this game, is that you are kind of building the map yourself every time you play it.
Yeah.
And of course, there are certain areas in the map that if you breach them, they automatically load a giant expanse of the map, which is obviously already there.
Oh, so you don't necessarily have the whole map on your radar. You can unlock other areas.
Yes, there might already be there's kind of like a fog of war over the whole land until you clear it yourself.
Yeah, I did like that. I like the way that it lets you do what you want. It's kind of sandboxy, isn't it?
In a way, yes, yeah. And so you have to look after your minions. You also have to note that at the end of the week, they get paid. And they'll all go to the nearest treasury room to get paid. And if you've got no gold, you're going to have a lot of unhappy monsters which are going to start fighting each other, or they're just going to walk out of your dungeon.
So you're broke right now.
I am broke right now. But that's fine. I've been concentrating at the moment on fighting the never-ending wave of heroes that keep coming at my dungeon heart.
Well, you must be doing
thankfully,
well, then.
you can see the red sort of spikes around each character. That represents how much health they have, and the number in the middle is what level they're currently at. Mistresses were always my favourite. I love their death screams.
Love a bit of pain.
Love a bit of pain. One of the big talking points, and one of the main reasons that you remember Dungeon Keeper, is for the voice of the mentor. The guy, the
voice actor.
The voice actor is Richard Ridings.
Yeah.
He's appeared on quite a few British TV shows, but he also provided the voice of Pigsy in Enslaved Odyssey to the West.
Okay.
Which was a fantastic game. Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. No, the pig. He was the pig.
He was, yeah.
Fable 2. He was also in Castlevania: Lords of Shadows. He's just a great voice actor. I don't remember his TV roles that much, but the voice and the charisma behind it, the sly devilry in it, was just great. It was just sadistic enough, but you also saw the humor in it. Of course, he provided the voice as well to the Horned Reaper, and did the voice work in Dungeon Keeper 2, and unfortunately the Dungeon Keeper mobile game. But I also want to talk about Russell Shaw, who does the music score for Dungeon Keeper.
Yeah.
His work on this is fantastic in setting up the atmosphere. You feel the dripping, dark, dank tunnels of your labyrinth. With the music, it just so atmospheric, and he would go on to do the music in all of the Fable games, which were also, so you can just see where he got his start, and just the music that he would go on to contribute to the games medium. Just fantastic.
Yeah, you can see all the things coming together for when Bulldog was great.
Yes.
It's a shame, isn't it, really?
It really is a shame.
It is a shame that they just destroyed it. It was so good at the time. You can see the love and care that's gone into this game.
Yes.
And how much, how much this was made by gamers.
Yeah. I mean, well, the development team went through, it was about 2.5 years development cycle. And Peter Molyneux said that most of this game really came together in its final few months because the amount of overhauls that they made to it. there was a game that came out called Command and Conquer.
Of course, yeah.
And at one point, Dungeon Keeper was scrapped and rebuilt again because they were like, no, this is now too much like Command and Conquer. This needs to be its own thing.
Yeah.
Where, going out and getting gold and mana to build your troops to send them out to fight. They were like, no, we need to change the user interface. We need to change the mechanics to make it not like Command and Conquer.
Oh, that's good.
And that's good.
That's nice to see.
Of course, EA wanted Bullfrog to rush the game out for Christmas, and it was Peter Molyneux who was kind of like, "No, the game's not finished yet. It's not being released until it's perfect." Yeah. And of course, he was bound by his contract. He was leaving EA, but he couldn't leave EA until this game was finished, and he refused to leave the company until this game was, in his eyes, perfect. And so eventually the development of the game went to Peter Molyneux's house with the core developers of the game working in his house for the final months before the game was finished.
Yeah.
That was the dedication they had for this game. And so, a real labour of love. But no, Peter Molyneux really had nothing to do with the game's sequel, Dungeon Keeper 2, which... it runs smoother, the graphics are a little bit sharper, there's a few more additions to it, a few more traps, more levels, basically the same game.
Yeah.
Bit more humour.
If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Exactly, yeah. But they changed a few things. I still think it's a great game. It did lack the polish, the final touches that this game kind of has. Like if you pick up a warlock in this game and shake him with the mouse cursor and then drop him, the warlock would be like, yeah, that was amazing. You do it in Dungeon Keeper 2 and drop him, they just go, it's just like they've lost a little bit of flavour, which was hidden, kind of. You wouldn't automatically be aware of it.
See, that's the difference between a game that is a paint by numbers kind of job.
Yes.
And a game which is like a flare of enjoyment of art. Like a lot of, say, for instance, of the classic Japanese games, like the Final Fantasies, the Marios, you can tell that there's a lot of love gone into those games because of all the crazy little touches like that you will come across in the game, and there's a good chance you'll go through the game and you'll never see them.
Right.
It's kind of like if you become an ultra fan and you sit and do the research and you'll get in the know, and that's what separates a labour of love apart from a money making job.
Right.
Really.
Yeah.
Like Molyneux, for all his mouth writing checks that his ass couldn't cash, at least you can say with him that he had ambition and he did love the idea of doing things that hadn't been done before and making a gamer's game.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that it's increasingly difficult to find games that are like that now. Yeah.
Peter Molyneux also, he said that the idea of this game, he conceived it when he was in a traffic jam. I was like, okay. But his dedication to the game, it does show off. And he said that the one complaint he has for the game is that the game has the user interface. He doesn't like the fact that you have to click on something, there's buttons to press which determine everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
Which is why I think when he went off and made Black and White, there's no user interface at all.
No.
So that was like his innovation was that you didn't want to see the controls. Yeah. Which of course he would continue to follow up with later on, unsuccessfully.
Black and White was very critically acclaimed as well, wasn't it?
Yes, was still, the God Sim.
Yeah, still. But obviously that was God Sim. That was more like a spiritual successor to Populous than this game.
Absolutely, yeah. But I obviously I never finished this game back in 1998, I think it was, when I first discovered this game.
Yeah.
After Command and Conquer. Fell in love with this game, played it, got the second one when it was released, absolutely loved it. Never really played games like this again. And so obviously coming back to this game, I managed to complete both this one and Dungeon Keeper 2 for the first time, which just feels fantastic to finally go back and play a game that's plagued me for 20 years that I never got to finish.
Yeah.
And I absolutely enjoyed the time with it. The first few dungeons, the first few levels, you knock them out in about half an hour, 40 minutes, an hour, and then you get to a dungeon like this one, which lasts like 2.5 hours. And it's like, gee, you know,
Yeah.
I've built a labyrinth of dungeons. I've had to reload it in because I failed, because I realized there was a crack in the walls and the heroes just came right through.
Yeah.
I didn't even have any traps, you know. And so it was really rewarding to come back and play this game. And so I highly recommend it, not just from nostalgia, but the fact that this game really has no competition in its field and really hasn't in 20 plus years.
Yeah.
Now,
Well, except now EA ruined the official license, and now
Absolutely.
its competition are its spiritual successors.
yes,
quote
that's
unquote.
right. The spiritual successors for Dungeon Keeper are out there, and they have been for just about before the Dungeon Keeper mobile,
Yeah.
and ever since. I'd like to mention War of the Overworld, which came out in 2015.
Yeah.
Which was one of those spiritual successors. It looks very nice. You know, it's the exact same kind of structure where you are a floating hand. You control your imps to break down walls. You build your rooms. You train creatures. You research spells. There's tech trees and things, and you send your minions to defend your area.
Yeah.
But it thematically, it's not as strong as Dungeon Keeper. After I looked at it, I was like, I can see the appeal. And if it wasn't for this other game that I'm about to mention, I would definitely go for War of the Overworld. But there's a series of games called Dungeons.
Yeah.
When Dungeons 1 came out, I looked at it. The reviews for it were mostly average at the time. You know, again, spiritual successor, and I was like, it's not Dungeon Keeper, so I'm going to give it a pass. Dungeons 2 in 2015, that got a lot of praise for kind of. That game feels like it's Dungeon Keeper with an expansion.
Okay.
And what I like about what Dungeons 2 and Dungeons 3, which came out in 2017, has done, has gone, okay, you're the Overlord, you build your dungeon, but that's only a part of the map. The actual dungeon building space is a lot smaller than Dungeon Keeper, but that's because it has the sort of outside of your dungeon locations, where there are towns and inns and villages filled with people. You build your forces in your dungeon, and you go send them out to go and invade those other locations. And so there's quite an appeal to that.
So now it's more part of the campaign feels much more like, instead of a sequence of levels, it's like
Still a sequence of levels,
has
but
a
expanded. It's bigger, and there's obviously a lot more variety.
sort of
And
connected. The levels are connected through a campaign of terror through an area of the land.
absolutely, and so that is the game that I would recommend if you were not going to go back and play Dungeon Keeper or attempt to play Dungeon Keeper. If you have, you know, the rejection of the graphics, I still think that this game is unrivaled in its field. It's awesomely crafted. You know, it's sadistic, but it's humorous and it's rewarding. The atmosphere, the tone, it's a near perfect game. I absolutely love it. Still love it. Highly recommend it.
Well, it's a testament to the fact that you've gone back 20 years later to finish it and been loving it.
Absolutely, yes, yeah, and so you got to thank the mod support and thank GOG, Good Old Games. They were the first ones to get the game back out there, replayable. And then of course Origin at EA are just like, well, you know, we can flog it, we can get rid of it.
Yeah. Abusing their license as they love to.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so with that, I just want to say thanks for watching, everyone. Go and get yourself a copy of Dungeon Keeper immediately. We'll have another video game review out next Friday. Of course, new film reviews on Thursdays. You can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Patreon, and on Discord. Links are in the description below. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you next time.
Take it easy.